Rick is a ranger in the Washington State area. And one day, he's out in the woods and he's clearing debris from trails, checking on campsites and other ranger duties. And it kind of starts to get late. So he decides, all right, I'm not going to go back to the duty station tonight. I'm just going to camp here for the night. So he starts setting up his camp, putting up his tent, starting a fire, and he gets that weird instinctual feeling that there's a predator out there somewhere. But most predators don't want anything to do with humans. So he figures he's really not in any real danger. Now the sun has set and that sky starts to turn that dark blue indigo color where you can't really see features anymore, but you can still see pretty sharp silhouettes. And Rick is looking at the tree line and he sees what looks like a huge set of shoulders and a head. And his first thought is, it's a bear standing up. I better try to spook this thing out of here. Now, bears are predators, but they really don't want anything to do with us. And if the bear knows you're there, if you start clapping and making noises, it'll usually get out of your way. So in an attempt to scare it off, he picks up a pine cone and he chucks it. And it hits this thing center mass, perfect hit, and boom, thuds to the ground. And the thing doesn't move. And he thinks, well, that's kind of weird. Well, maybe it is a tree and I just hit a branch or something. And he looks closer and he sees what he thinks almost looks like fur. But then in his head, he's thinking, well, okay, it must be a tree with moss growing on it. And that wasn't quite right either. But whatever it is, isn't fitting into any category of known items or past experiences in his brain. So he just chalks it up to being a tree because that's the closest thing his mind can grasp. And he goes back to tending his fire and getting himself some dinner. But he can't stop thinking about it. So finally, he walks back over to where he saw it and it's gone. So he's thinking, it must have been a bear. But holy cow, if that was a bear, that bear has nerves of steel. How bizarre. But whatever. There's his rational explanation. So Rick spends the rest of the evening just kind of hanging out, watching his fire, watching the stars, until he decides it's about time to go to bed. So he climbs into his tent, and just as he's about to drift off to sleep, he can hear, very softly, footsteps coming toward his tent. Then he hears what sounds like fur, just barely grazing the fabric of the tent. Now he has a rifle, so he grabs it, kind of turns over on his side so he can get some leverage, and hits at it. Boom! Connects with it just square right on it. And this thing is solid. Imagine hitting a tree trunk with a bat. That's how solid this thing was. But he doesn't hear it move. No screams of pain. Nothing. Everything is dead quiet for a few seconds until he sees the impression of a 5-fingered hand pressed down on the top of his tent. He could see every finger and even hair coming off the sides through the tent fabric silhouetted by the moon. And the hand is just pressing down until he can hear the tension in the tent poles as they kind of start to creak and bend. And he is convinced this tent is going to collapse in on him. So he's laying there flat on his back in full panic mode with nowhere to go for a few agonizing seconds until the hand just gently lifts up and he can hear footsteps padding away from his campsite. So thoroughly spooked, he slowly climbs out of his tent and looks around, but he doesn't see anything. And he's thinking, okay, what are my options? I can either try to hike it back to base camp or stay for the night. It's like 2 a.m. So trying to hike out of there is probably not the best option. His best option is probably to just stick it out for the night. He rekindles his fire, sits next to that fire, holding his rifle. And at some point, he kind of dozes off because he is awakened by a little thud next to his feet. And he looks and there are pine cones on the ground at his feet. And he's trying to shake the fog from his brain when another pine cone comes flying in and hits him on the boot. And then another one. hits him on the boot. And he realizes that whatever it is sitting in the tree line just out of view, just out of sight, throwing these pine cones at him. And he is completely frozen in fear. He has no idea what to do. So he doesn't do anything. He just sits by the fire. And sometimes pine cones would launch in from the dark and hit him. And sometimes it would stop for a while. And he just sat there in front of his fire with his rifle for a couple more hours until the sun started to come up. Now, once it was light enough that you could see the trail, he got up, packed up his campsite with his rifle never more than an arm's length away, and got out of there. Now, Rick has no idea what he encountered that night, but he does know there are things in the woods that are not afraid of us.